I did the math last year, not the math everyone does. How many years I've lived. The other one, how many I actually have left if I'm honest about the averages, minus the ones I'll spend asleep, sick, or too old to do anything but watch. It's a small number, smaller than I wanted. And when I sat with that number, I looked back at what I'd spent the last 20 years building. The relationships I maintained out of obligation, the opinions I managed, the promotions I angled for, the version of myself I kept carefully presented to rooms that have long since emptied, and most of it doesn't survive contact with that number at all. Not because it was wrong to want those things, because I never stopped to ask whether they were worth the years I was paying for them. He spent 15 years climbing toward a title that took him 6 more years to stop caring about once he had it. He spent his 30s managing how a room of people he'd never see again perceived him. Neighbors, colleagues, men from a version of his life he'd already outgrown but couldn't stop performing for. None of it was wasted on accident. It felt urgent at the time, necessary, the responsible thing a serious man does when he's trying to build something. The problem wasn't ambition. The problem was that he never audited what he was ambitious for. Seneca wrote that men are not stingy with their lives, only with their money. They'll spend years the way they'd never spend a dollar carelessly on people and outcomes that forgot them within the week. He spent a decade earning the respect of men who retired, moved away, or died before he finished earning it. The account he was depositing into was closed before he ever tried to withdraw. Somewhere in his 40s, he stopped noticing how much of his day was spent performing for an audience that wasn't paying attention. The neighbor's opinion of his lawn, the old friend who only shows up to compare, the version of himself he kept polished for people who had already made up their minds about him years before and weren't going to revise. That audience never asked him to perform. He assigned himself the role and then quietly resented the unpaid hours. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself of the same thing every single morning, not because it was a new thought, but because the habit of living for an audience doesn't break on its own. It has to be interrupted on purpose, daily, like a man pulling a weed that grows back overnight regardless of how thoroughly he pulled it the day before. The performance doesn't stop because you get tired of it. It stops when you finally decide the audience was never worth the admission you've been charging yourself. Comfort doesn't announce itself as the enemy. It arrives disguised as rest he's earned, as the version of Tuesday that doesn't ask anything of him, as the reasonable decision to wait until he feels like it. And the years move through that version of Tuesday at exactly the same speed as every other year. They just leave nothing behind when they go. He'll tell you he's tired. He's not wrong. The decade he spent overextended, underappreciated, grinding toward outcomes that kept moving, left a mark. But tired and finished are not the same condition, and he has been treating them as if they were for longer than he'd like to count. The years he spent comfortable were not recovery. They were rehearsal for stopping. And the difference between a man who recovered and a man who stopped is not energy. It's what he decided the tiredness meant. If this one hit close to home, subscribe. Every episode goes one level deeper. You need to be here for what comes next. Busyness is the easiest lie a serious man tells himself because it comes with evidence. A calendar, a list, the satisfying exhaustion of a long day that produced nothing that will exist in 5 years. He has confused motion with progress so completely that slowing down to ask, toward what, feels like the irresponsible move, when it is the only responsible one left. Every hour spent efficiently on the wrong target is still an hour spent on the wrong target. He's been optimizing a route to a destination he never chose, just inherited from a version of his life he built in his 20s when he didn't know enough to choose differently. Machiavelli built his entire study of power on a discipline most men skip entirely, knowing exactly what he was spending his effort on and why before he spent it. Not after the years were gone. Before. Once things settled down has been the same sentence for 11 years, and things have not settled down, and they were never going to because the conditions he's waiting for were never real conditions. They were permission he was issuing to himself to keep postponing without having to call it quitting. That sentence isn't a plan. It's a release valve. It lets him hold the intention without paying the cost of acting on it, which means he gets to feel like the man who is going to do the thing without becoming the man who actually does. Every year he renews the sentence, he renews the lie underneath it, that the version of next year where he finally starts is somehow more real, more ready, more possible than the version of this year where he already could. It isn't. It never has been. The man who is going to start next year has been saying it since the year before that. The number doesn't care how busy he was. It doesn't subtract years for good intentions or credit him for the version of himself he meant to become. It only counts what got spent and on what. And once a man actually sees the number, not as a threat, not as a scare tactic, but as a fact he can finally use to make a different decision, something in him stops being willing to keep paying full years for things that were always going to forget him. That's not despair. That's the clearest moment of leverage he's had in decades. Most men feel it once and then let the calendar absorb it. The ones who don't are the ones who stopped asking for more time and started asking a different question entirely. Not how much is left, but what it's actually for. You have more behind you than you have in front of you, and you have known that for longer than you've let yourself sit with it, which is exactly why you keep reaching for the sentence that buys you one more year of postponing the thing you actually want to become. Because sitting with it requires admitting that the years already spent on the wrong things are gone in a way that no amount of future effort reverses. And that is not a comfortable thing for a man who still believes he's been mostly on track to finally look at directly. But the looking is the thing, not the plan after the looking, not the motivation the looking is supposed to generate, just the act of seeing it clearly for once, without the sentence, without the next year, without the version of yourself you keep promising is coming soon. You already know what you've been spending. The question that's left is simpler than you've been making it, and you already know the answer to that one too. You already know what you are. Finally ruthless.